This is something that you can fall on your face really hard, really quick. And these stages are not cheap. And so it's hard to get an education around this stuff because, you know, a stage is costing $4 million to build, you know, or more, depending on the size of the stage. And there's a lot of very complex technologies in here.
So Erik Weaver, thank you for joining Cup of Joe. I appreciate it, bud. We've known each other for a few years now since I've joined the studio cloud era of things. On left the studio life, I've come to meet you down in LA, and you've brought us into some great events down there. It's been great. So we always, whenever we get to LA, there's always some extra event that we're going to do with you. So it's been a real pleasure knowing you over the years. Your background is deep in both technology and the M&E sector. After spending a lot of time most recently as the Western Digital Global Marketing Director. And people don't know, Western Digital is much bigger than people think. You know, they just think it's like maybe a drive they buy in Best Buy, but it's really behind a lot of storage. They own SanDisk, G-Tech. And there's a big hockey stick of Flash and NVMe now that's hit the market. And
that's actually the more exciting stuff right now.
That's
NVMe over Fabric is fascinating.
Yeah, I find that whether it's NVMe over Fabric or whether or not just at the desktop level, it's now sort of built into the standard build of bill of materials for nearly any machine I'm building right now. So you were there for kind of that whole hockey stick, and now you're fully into the Entertainment Technology Center at the University of Southern California. It's a think tank research center, explores and works on topics that are issues related to the media and entertainment. It started by George Lucas back in the 90s.
About 26, almost 7 years ago. Yeah. So it's been around for a little bit. They created things like DCI or digital cinema, IMF, interoperable master format, and C4 is something I actually ran before. And so it's a SMPTE standard 2117-2017.
Gotcha. And so yeah, as a research organization, you're not only analyzing and testing the newest technology and keeping your thumb on the pulse, but you're actually influencing where that technology is heading or getting it into some rails where it can hit the market and really be effective. So you kind of bring the market together with these folks, but in a very non-profity way, as opposed to what we do in the other side of the vendor side. It's
I
very
report
open.
Basically to a board that's the CTO of Disney, Warner Brothers, Universal, Paramount, New Fox, and a couple others. So yeah, we get to kind of look at the industry as a whole, where it's going, because typically you don't want to have a beta versus VHS war anymore. You want to try and work at least somewhat together. We don't do formalized standards. We eventually get a standard 80% of the way there and then pass it off to like a SMPTE or something like that.
Oh, fantastic. I think one of the most recent endeavors you guys took to bring this all together is bring it to a real life project, and that was the ripple effect. I'll link to the paper here. It's a short film. It's a push the limits of virtual production, technology, and COVID safety. And again, I'll include the white paper in a link here, but maybe you can tell us a little bit more about ripple effect.
Sure, certainly. So what we do is we're doing kind of an annual, this is actually our fourth film. We're prepping for the fifth film. So we take a look from the CTO's perspective of what is really interesting, what do they need to know more about? And sometimes if you're a major player at a big studio, you don't want to put a brand new tech on a $100 million TV show or film, right? Because if you completely fall over on this, it's not good for anybody, right? So what we get to do is we work with the studios to define basically what are your top 2 dozen questions or things you want answered around certain areas. In Ripple Effect, it started with COVID safety. How do we successfully get back on production? And again, this was done last summer. We shot in like June-ish timeframe. So that was a really big question at that time. How do we maintain safety protocols in this very complex environment? The secondary thing was virtual production. What is this whole new thing of virtual production? What is an LED wall? What is in-camera VFX mean? And how do you execute on all of this stuff? And so we eventually did about 11 weeks of pre-production and production, of which we had about 6 key funding organizations. We had 27,000 messages on Slack. We recorded 110 meetings. to produce 9 minutes of content. But it was an amazing learning experience. And we have documented the whole thing. Like you said, the white paper, we have a 148-page white paper, which, yes, is a tad excessive, but it's a wonderful paper if you want to learn a lot more about virtual production.
And that coincides. Yeah, I mean, this white paper, it's not just a how we did it, but it's sort of a how you can do it. I think it's very similar to the type of stuff you see coming out of VES. I recently highlighted the VES handbook. People, and I was making a joke that the one thing not really in it was the most modern incarnations of virtual production. I mean, virtual production as a term has been around for a while, and it described a row of technologies leading to today, but it was absent of that. So for those who were asking, and maybe I'll put a link here and put a comment there, it's people were asking, this is a good place to go to start getting a full breadth look at all of the issues and documenting sort of the hurdles and the road bumps and the roadblocks that you had to get through to get and you look out for, so you don't make the same, they don't have to go through the same learning process that this team did.
Yeah, it's kind of a very fundamental look at these are the challenges you're going to face. And this is really important to start getting your mind around it early, because some things you're not going to expect. Like, you don't understand maybe that your VAD developments or your virtual asset departments are going to take a lot more time than you potentially were expecting. You don't know that you've got to move a lot of your VFX budget up front and create those assets in advance if you want in-camera VFX, right? There's a lot of other things that are really important in building this pipeline that are absolutely critical, and just getting a kind of a solid foundation of what you're doing there, because this is something that you can fall on your face really hard, really quick. And these stages are not cheap. And so it's hard to get an education around this stuff, because, a stage is costing $4 million to build, or more, depending on the size of the stage. And there's a lot of very complex technologies in here, from like the Stipe tracking system to playback if you're using Unreal or some Disguise or something else like that. Then you've got all your different computing systems to run the walls and everything. So there's a lot of things that can also go wrong, as well as even trying to figure out your parallax issues and your other issues.
Yeah, absolutely. We're seeing a lot of there's huge growth, as is inferred in what we're talking about here. Virtual production is in the LED video wall version of it is huge growth right now. We were just commenting in a forum, a popular virtual production forum, talking to some other folks about how the labor crunch is going to be, and training is going to be a bit of a challenge here. Not only because it's a new way of thinking, visual effects artists can come into this, but they're not used to working on set. They're not used to working in that real time, hurry up and wait kind of format that can be on set. And furthermore, there's a real hiring crunch right now. As much as, I try to humbly point this out, because a lot of people are suffering during the COVID times finding a job in the animation, visual effects, pre-production, production world. There is huge growth right now, and virtual production is allowing that growth to continue to happen through COVID times. Up here in Vancouver, we've got a handful of places that are opening. You'll be seeing more in the news in the coming months, as well as we've seen what already done out in Montreal and in Toronto. What that means now is you can come to, say, Vancouver, fly your team just once, get through all the protocols, get everyone into one spot, and then you can shoot in all your locations just by staying in this virtual production facility. So this is where everyone's heading, but the learning curve is steep, and there's a reason they call it the bleeding edge. That's I put
really
that off
on this one. So the numbers that I'm seeing is there's roughly 200 stages that are going to go live this year. At an average, if you're saying an average of $4 million per stage, this is about a $700+ million investment. People don't know how to work these stages. There's very little talent out there. I probably get almost one a day. People come to me asking me to repost a job. Look, hey, can you post this? Get some word out. We're really trying to find someone. That talent or that knowledge is really incredibly valuable right now. Tons of work.
It brings together a lot of different. Luckily, all the elements are there in current visual effects and animation and game, entertainment industries, but it's a whole new configuration of those folks. So there's an IT infrastructure component that's really strong: cabling, power, cooling. Where you're going to rack mount this stuff. How are you?
All these complex systems, from your Brampton and how you tune the Brampton, from the LED wall itself to how's the Unreal playing back to how many different systems are creating frame lag within your Stipe or your tracking system. Yes, there's a lot of knowledge there. I think another thing you pointed out that was really important is that it's the molding of several different knowledges. There's two key situations right now. You get something like a traditional person who's good, or a company that's good at previs, or someone who's good at VFX. Well, these skills have to merge now. You need to understand what a final asset's going to look like in that polished asset in VFX skill set. And you need to know how to do the whole previs, setting it up, structuring it in Viz, getting into things like TechViz. So these skills are merging right here. The other set of skills that are emerging right now are understanding a DP's understanding, and basically an Unreal understanding. How does a game engine work? But how do you take that cinematographic look to what you're doing in the production? And how do you blend both those skill sets together? So those are two major sets of knowledge that are coming together to create completely new skill sets.
Yeah, luckily the most experienced, and what I call it when you go to a SIGGRAPH party, the gray hairs, the folks who have really got the experience in the studios, they often have done on-set work as well, and they're going to help bring that together, the idea of how you operate on set. When my wife started doing client side versus post-production, I started learning through the grapevine of how different the environment is, and it's almost, it feels like a different industry at times. And so yeah, the growth is there, and again, COVID is I would say fueling that growth. It was already on track, but this really put some rockets on it and set it off.
Well, I'd actually say that there's three things that have
Yeah.
basically really shifted the shift. I mean, we're talking about a fundamental shift, kind of like when the tsunami hit the Sony lab that was building all the tapes and the drive systems, right? The storage devices. Once it disappeared, now they had to look at file-based workflows, right? So you have the same kind of radical thing. You have Unreal. If you've looked at some of the stuff now, that stuff is amazing today. I mean, what you can build in Unreal is actually photoreal. It's amazing.
Yeah, I'll show some images here from the latest stuff coming out of the NVIDIA documentation and brochures and collateral. Just looked I mean, it was
mind blowing.
It was,
right?
It's hard to use this word lightly, but it's Pixar quality. At that point, I mean, again, someone Pixar is going to shoot me, but it's really getting up there to that level. And it's real time. And
the other thing is exactly what you just pointed out there. NVIDIA, the ability to do real-time ray tracing and other things right now is absolutely blowing up as well. That those chips, I mean, if you can get them, if you can get the graphics cards, those are the second aspect of why this pendulum shift is changing. And then third, it's pioneers like ILM and COVID. I mean, so ILM is basically really pioneered a trail there forward on what is possible. They have budgets beyond most of us, but they were really showing you what you can be done. And now people are beginning to get a hold of that. So I think that there's several things there again.
Behind the scenes, the entire Disney technology infrastructure team is very collaborative. So, when ILM is doing that, it's also with the power and might of the whole Disney machine behind them. And ILM on its own was a pretty strong machine before it had Disney attached to it. And so, yeah, another thing to point out too is that Disney doesn't do things that aren't profitable. They will maybe have to take the hit on their first, everyone has to take a hit on their first technology leap, but they're doing this because it's profitable. And you can always count on, when you look at companies like Disney or even DreamWorks and Sony, they're run by corporate. And one thing I've learned over the years is if they're doing it, it's because it's profitable. There are smaller shops that will do it, for the win. These folks are doing it because it is very, very profitable to do this, and this is the direction things are going in. It's not going to replace, like all the technologies that preceded it, it will not replace. It will just supplant a little percentage of how things are done going forward. We're still doing things in the can. We're still setting up models. We're still having Gandalf stand a foot away from Frodo, so it looks like he's bigger. Every technique from the 30s to now is still employed. This is just the next layer. And this is where things are going. Now, you had mentioned some names there. I know that one of the complaints I'm hearing out there is just supply shortages. Now, for the record, this is not a virtual production problem. This is a technology problem. From the droughts in Taiwan to the COVID disruptions of the supply chains, there's not one conversation I have where we don't have to work with the big suppliers to make sure we have our supply chain coming in. Luckily, at CDW, big company, we can get the supply chain coming in, but it's hard. And I'm on the but when it comes to things like virtual production panels, these are not Isilon servers. These are much more unicorn sort of purchases out there. What are you seeing out there when it comes to the supplier shortages?
Well, so I mean, like a lot of our partners can't get their hands on the 3090s or some of the stuff to drive the Unreal Engine
And these are
on
the
stage.
NVIDIA video cards, 3090.
Yes.
Yes.
So you're going to really want to push that to its limit. A lot of those things don't have an NVMe bridge link, so you don't really need more than one, but you still need to be at least having some of the latest, greatest cards for these environments. A lot of our folks are going to things like Demon or Devil systems because they're very, very high-ended playback for all the different panels because they work in groups or in batches and they have to all coordinate together. So that takes a lot of compute power as well.
Yeah, we've seen a lot of people escalate their move. More of the corporate and medium big companies just escalate straight into the RTX 8000, 6000 series of NVIDIA cards, which is the higher end card that does allow for NVLink. And
Yeah,
just around now, probably NVIDIA's finally got the NVLink's drivers and everything going for the Amperes. There was a little lag there,
there
but
was.
you probably couldn't get the card anyway, so it didn't matter.
Yeah,
No, but
that is true.
yeah, but NVLink is where you can combine multiple cards and really start harnessing the power of multiple cards. And this is doing it in a more 2x2 fashion. These are not big arrays of the GTX. That's coming down the road, but we're not quite
Yeah.
there yet. And again, we're pairing those up. And of course, we haven't mentioned it once yet with Threadrippers. The Threadripper is really helping with, especially when you're driving multiple channels, multiple walls. We're seeing that folks are greatly taking advantage of the new Threadripper built into, desktop formats. You've heard me probably speak, well, some of my folks have seen me talk about the Lenovo P620 is like this really all-in-one box that has everything in it. You can get it right now, and you can stick rack rails on it. So it's sort of been like a good workhorse, a good pickup truck style kind of machine that can do all the things you need it to do. That is available out there too. So if you're really hurting, it's of course a premium machine, but you're getting a premium product. And I just heard recently on a forum the buy once cry once kind of comment. So just buy the right machine once, cry, and you're set for life. Set for 3 years. So yeah, so the supplier shortages on the panel side, I believe it's not what it was, say, a year ago, the shortages. It seems to be with the competitors coming into the market and then everyone kind of getting used to the new realities. Would you say that's smoothing out a little bit? I'm hearing months
I'm
and
still seeing
weeks.
shortages personally,
Oh, yeah?
but I think that, yeah, I think that it will begin to smooth out. I'm really excited about seeing NVIDIA's conference. I believe is this month, towards the middle
TTC?
of the month. That should be exciting to see what they're going to be announcing coming around the corner next and where that's going. But a lot of these things that we're talking about really don't affect like traditional gamers in that because most of those tools and applications can't actually leverage multiple GPUs. Very few programs can. So this is only affecting kind of the higher end market or the markets like we're dealing with.
Yes, and truth be told, a lot of the bigger companies have a trickle down sort of chain of purchasing. So the machines that are currently being put into some of the places that we built out some pretty large virtual productions studios up here, and with dozen plus machines to power it. Those machines will be in the effects artists' hands next year, and 2 years from now they're going to be in the lighters and the animators' hands. So these machines, when they buy them in the larger studios, they sort of plan it into this cascade down. So those machines still provide really cutting edge value the third year in because the animators are finally getting their hands on those Threadrippers with the dual RTX, and so you'll find that trickle down happen. So again, it may be if you're getting into virtual production, I would say it is not the time to try to do it too cheap. You will fall short. You'll have more ray patterns. You kind of have to go all in on this. I would say
Yeah.
maybe restrict the scope of the wall you're trying to create would be the way to contain costs a bit. There's the stuff that Pixo just promoted that they did out in Toronto, right? I think try at Toronto. But I do know that Pixo is very public. In fact, I would recommend you take a look at their Instagram feed or whatever. It was a beautiful journey. Watching them build that out, but then again you can constrain it. Though that's max size. That's a full huge warehouse. You constrain it.
So, and
quite
I
a
think
bit.
that that's a confusion.
Please.
Confusion you're getting that people are assuming everything has to be Mandalorian style or like almost 340 degrees around LED or 180 degree around. That's not where the most of the work is. Most of the work right now is in car plates and driving scenes. That is the bulk of the virtual production workflows. They'll just stick 6K cameras on a driving rig, create all the plates, and then play it back. A lot of the work is very commercial based currently, as this big studios get into it. But yeah, there's these smaller sizes. There's a mid-size application, and then there's these huge volume applications, and they're very different applications. And don't think that you just have to drop $5 to $6 million and build the top state of the art.
And everything
there's
that
other applications.
Sorry, and everything that virtual production meant 2 years ago is still completely available. You can set up a green screen studio and do a lot of the real-time work that's happening with green screens and trackers and all kinds of things. So it doesn't have to be on an LED panel the size of a warehouse, like you said. While you're talking about those common myths, is there any other common pitfalls or sort of problems you see early on that people should definitely keep their eyes out for and they don't fall into those traps? I mean, your paper covers
again,
it in detail.
I just go out and get as much knowledge as you can. If you put too many systems in there, you're going to get frame lag eventually to the tracking systems. I pay attention to that. Just absolutely go to someone who's done this before and learn as much as you can from them before you get on there. Oh, the other thing that's really important is getting these systems working and operational takes longer than you'd expect. So you have to go and test your facility several days beforehand. And I've fought with my engineers like, hey, I need to get on the stage by Tuesday. They're like, no, we need at least 2, if not 3 days to make sure everything's working properly. And, I'm trying to push them back. But like one day, the wall just didn't turn on for half the day. I don't know why. They don't know why. This is a little bit more of an art than a science at this particular point. And there's just weird hiccups or complexities that you will run into. You will, if you know what you're doing, be able to execute things at a much higher rate by changing daytime, lighting, scenes, everything rather quickly. You have to learn how to be ready and how to run at that particular time that the gun goes off.
And I don't know if you can answer this on the Ripple, but it sounds like it was pretty open production. Did you guys ever have to eventually just flip to turning it into a green screen, an LED green screen?
No, we never had to do that, but we did run into one other problem. Is we turned it to full white lights on all the LEDs, and we blew the power out. Yeah, so we shut the power down, and we basically took about a half an hour, 45 minutes to get it back up, and we had to turn the air conditioner off in the building.
Yeah, it sounds like you hit an upstream circuit, one of the 100 amps or something like that.
We had a huge facility. We had a pretty big volume too, so I mean.
Gotcha. Yeah, no, the brightness levels, the nits levels on those are widely variable.
They're very, yeah. I mean, the common panels are probably going to be the Black Pearls by ROE with a Brampton processor is the most common, which is basically 2.85 pixel pitch. The little brother to that would be the Diamonds, which are 2.6. Those are fairly common standard walls. And yeah, when you're talking 22 feet tall by 180 feet around, that does take a bit of juice. We've seen it costing around $800 to $1,000 a day just to run the electricity.
And it speaks to the variability in the brightness too. I've heard that many of the shops are not using them nearly as bright as their maximum.
Yeah, I think that those particular panels go somewhere between 800 and possibly up to 1,200 nits. I believe off the top of my head.
Gotcha. Yeah, I'm wondering how much the top end, because I've had to consult now, brainstorm with a few folks as to, is how much some of the panels, especially the competitive panels, won't quite have the nits. And the question is, do you need that top end level? And is that little edge going to kill you? I ask you, actually, you probably have a good answer on that.
So actually on this one, we're very, very interested in this. Also about putting HDR content on these screens and the difference it makes. So what we're doing is we're starting to bring in some of the next generation panel makers. The Wall by Samsung, the Wall Pro, we had those both on stage last time. We're working with LG to get their latest pieces. The new Sony CLED B series is also an ideal candidate once it actually hits the market. So there are a bunch of other panels coming around the corner. Also, that most common or the best used one, which is the Black Pearl, is about to do a refresh. So they will have a new version of that coming out very soon. So we're watching and tracking all these things. I have a working group that's all the heads of virtual productions from Amazon, Netflix, Sony, Disney, all the folks. So we look at a lot of these things, and we meet like every other week to discuss different aspects of the technology.
Where do you see this going a few years out? Like where do you think this is going to grow to as a next step?
I think this is absolutely going to explode. This is going to be a major skill set in the industry. I think it's going to take over a lot more than we expected to take over. Like you said, I could just fly to Vancouver and I can shoot all of my environments, be it in Tunisia, be it in Africa, be it in LA. I can do them all there now. And so if the stage is where I need it to be, I'm just going to get it done that way. And everyone will be working on this in 5 years. You will have to know some aspect of some of these things. The one other piece of advice I would give for anybody trying to look into this is I highly recommend that you learn more about Unreal. Unreal is going to be a dominant force in the next age. As we go to, I think we're at 4.26 and we go to 5, it's just going to get better and better. What this stuff can do, and getting a comprehension of it is something that's very different than our own mindset. So I went through the Unreal Fellowship and I had really hard time with just silly things. Like, for example, I hadn't worked on a Windows computer in 15 years. I have a Mac, right? The key things. I don't video game, right? I'm not a gamer with like playing Fortnite. So moving the character around to set up my scene was awkward for me. It seems pretty fundamental, but just getting your hands around how the tool works. Because if you don't understand that, you can make a lot of errors, including something like LOD. And what LOD is level of description. So you might have made a 2 million pixel count radio in your scene, and all of a sudden you're wondering why everything keeps failing. The whole scene keeps blowing up on you. And you don't need it to be 2 million pixels or whatever it is,
I got you. Yeah, that's Unreal. I mean, I was going to ask you, for students getting started, the obvious answer is make sure you get started with Unreal. And I don't mean just students I do have a lot of students that follow, but I mean anyone who's looking to get into this. There is a wealth of free training information to start with.
Yes.
Besides just a fellowship, there's a primer that Unreal makes available to you that'll start walking through the steps. I went deep into it a bit. I found myself, I had the gaming part down, but because I'm not a CG artist, the moving the plane around, like, my artist wants this down, they start wiggling around their 3D environment. I'm sitting here trying to remember how do you control and shift, and it looks like I'm in like the first version of Google Earth, and I can't quite figure it out. So yeah, I had my challenges as well, but I wanted to start getting a little more familiar with it just to understand it. I don't do any real visual effects work or graphics, but just getting in there and really understanding what it is. So get yourself trained up. And I've heard a few visual effects artists say, make sure that all of your assets are built with the ability to go into Unreal going forward.
Yeah, so that's an interesting trick that we're trying to pay attention to is, I don't know if you're following Ominverse from NVidia.
Oh yeah, I just saw a demo of it, and or a video demo of it, and it was fascinating.
It's very fascinating. I absolutely recommend that you take a look at that. What Ominverse is attempting to be, in case people don't know, is the HTTP of virtual production. It's attempting at its core to be able to have all the different tools across the life cycle, use it as the middle point to connect into Unreal or into Unity or whatever you're using there through primarily USD if you're not following that.
Yeah, universal screen description.
Yeah.
Sorry, thank you.
So
I'll put it on the bottom.
But I think it's a fascinating project, and we're really excited to see where that particular technology goes, because it could simplify, like you said, if you're bringing an asset in from Maya or from other exports, you want to make sure that it's going to work.
And it supports a good pipeline methodology where everyone working on all of the various levels through Ominverse, you can see it come together in one view. A lot of visual effects shops put a lot of pipeline work in the ability for all the artists to pick up the latest versions. But these latest versions happen after a few days, maybe even after a few weeks.
Few minutes, yes.
Here it's real. We keep saying real time because it's real time. Somebody saves out that asset, boom, you're getting a freshly new rendered asset over there of what they just uploaded. And then you look at folks like I just interviewed Phil Kramer, who's the animation supervisor for Digital Domain, and they've created their own tools. It's called Animviz, where it's a similar thing where for him to present his animation, he doesn't just present his animation, he presents his animation with whatever has been done so far for that scene, embedded in the scene in a rough layout and a rough blocking kind of set situation, so that the directors, and not all of them, are savvy enough to look at an animation by itself, an animated character, and then judge how that's going to look in the film, right?
Yeah.
So this gives them that ability to do that. And the more you can put that in the creative's hands, let them see the final product as they work. That's what render farms are doing all day. They're not rendering the final frames. They're rendering constant little iterations so people can see their work. And with Unreal, and under Kim Library's leadership, and I always like to call it his name because I think, he I don't say he alone, but as a leader, just drove this whole area, and now saw the value of real time, being at studios like DD and such, seeing the weight, how it's all about artists waiting. That's where all the money goes. You take it all away with Unreal. And 2 years ago, as a render guy, for me, I was probably rolling my eyes up until about 2 or 3 years ago, thinking like, yeah, right. And then all of a sudden it changed and it hit that hockey stick. And with the latest NVIDIA technology, it's just taken off. So yeah, Ominverse.
So one other shout out, I'd love to get him on that particular aspect.
Yeah, please do.
Perforce. So Perforce is basically a real-time GitHub for your assets. In one of the situations, we were working with Lux Machina on their stage and Halon. Halon was doing VAD development. So we were changing the scene live. And Halon was remote, and they had basically a pipeline via Perforce and their own connectivity, where basically Paul was sitting on there saying, okay, I need to do this and this. And then the DP was calling out, there's a change here, the color's off there, all this stuff. And so Halon was real time changing it from in Santa Monica somewhere to downtown LA. And we were getting it all changed and then shooting. So it's a pretty cool pipeline.
Yeah, so if you're an artist, you should, you're going to be getting anywhere near real time, learn about Perforce. And in general, and I even tell the IT folks who I find often are the last folks on to get on this train, get into checking in your software and code, whether it's your network switches or whether it's your scene. However you're doing it, you want to get into this mentality that everything goes into a centralized database of code and changes that everyone else can access. And it's the key. It's what pipelines do, and now it's what these asset management and tools do. And now Perforce, which is more of like a code management, but this assets are code, so it sort of sees it as the same thing. And this is the way to move forward: is to stop. There's no more saving things in a directory and pointing someone to that directory. Get out of that mindset. Every object store developer is begging you to get out of that mindset. But yeah, we got to get away from paths and get into this mindset.
This is a whole thing that I preached for years. I'm a big believer in C4, which I helped standardize through SMPTE, and it's a common hashing algorithm that has a Merkle tree built in. So basically, you are all following the same rules. You can identify an asset, create a secondary database that knows everything about that asset. It gets rid of the brittleness of a pipeline. You've got to be very careful of a brittle pipeline when you're doing paths and links and URLs and all that stuff.
Pipelines break all day long, and it's all because of things like that. So Well, this was very informative, and I'm very eager. I had hopes that NAB, which was postponed, might be the window of post-COVID convention. I don't know now, maybe.
So I'm actually producing 5 talks on Amplified around this particular topic of virtual production. So I think our first one will come out April 22nd. And then I'm doing a half day at NAB in the Creative Masters series, where we're going to bring in experts to talk about it. So NAB, again, as you know, is now in, I believe, October. It looks like IBC, which I'm also working with, will be most likely in December this year. So we will have a lot more materials coming out and giving educational pieces to people. And finding out who these key leaders are and what their wisdom is on the topics as well.
Well, I really, really, on many levels, hope to see you in Vegas. We'll see.
I'm going to be there.
I hear you.
I'm showing up.
And luckily, as a U.S. Canadian, well, I'm getting my citizenship here in the next month. But as a U.S. citizen, it's the border isn't exactly closed to me, but it's a little bit of a rigmarole coming in and out. So I will see where it goes. But I'm eager to get down there and yeah. So it's been a real pleasure, Erik. We'll talk again. I think what we'll probably do is maybe in another year or so, assuming I'm still doing this, we'll get together again and kind of snapshot with where we left off and how it's changed, and maybe see what the next year looks like. So,
Absolutely.
all right. Thanks a lot. Cheers.
Cheers.